Thank you.
All right, now Finance Minister Matthias Cormann has been speaking to the media in Canberra in the last few minutes. Let's take him now.
Can you imagine if we had a return to the Labor Green government of the past? I mean, this is just the same old Labor as we've had in the past. The Australian people do not want to see a return to the same bad old Labor ways of the past with higher taxes, fewer jobs and weaker borders. That is why the Australian people should very seriously consider the risk associated with a return to a Labor Green government. We have a plan for jobs and growth, and we have a plan to keep our borders strong. That is what we put forward to the Australian people in this election. Happy to take questions.
Any Victoria concerns that after the car manufacturers or car parts manufacturers are yet to fully transition ahead of the closure of Ford? Is the government doing enough? Has the government had to change gears to make sure that we don't see all these jobs lost?
Well, the government is providing a lot of support to the manufacturing industry, and indeed the government's whole national economic plan is a plan for jobs and growth. Labor is proposing more than $100 billion in higher taxes, which would be bad for investment, bad for jobs and bad for growth. And despite more than $100 billion in additional Labor taxes compared to our policy position, they still have a $66 billion budget black hole. That is, they still have $66 billion in unfunded spending promises. Any spending promise, including the spending promises that Bill Shorten will make today, are completely meaningless unless Bill Shorten explains to the Australian people how he would pay for them, unless he explains to the Australian people how he will pay for his $66 billion budget black hole. And just to go back to the more general point, any leader of a major party that is opposed to a more competitive business tax rate is not in favour of more jobs. Any leader who made it difficult for us to sign an export trade deal with China is not in favour of more jobs. Any leader that wants to increase taxes by more than $100 billion over the next decade is not a leader that stands for more jobs. It's a leader that stands for fewer jobs. We are providing support to the manufacturing industry. Our plan, our national economic plan for jobs and growth, with support for start-up businesses, with our innovation and science agenda, our defence industry plan, our export trade deals, our tax cuts for small and medium-sized businesses initially, and for hard-working families. Our plan to ensure that the budget is on a sustainable foundation for the future, cracking down on tax avoidance, ensuring that tax concessions and superannuation are more appropriately targeted. Our guaranteed funding for health, education and roads, that is the plan that will deliver jobs and growth in the years ahead.
The Australia Institute has warned that as Australian companies pay less tax, less tax in Australia, they'll have to pay more tax in the US. How can tax cuts stimulate jobs and growth if extra money is going overseas?
That commentary from the Australian Institute today is factually incorrect. It is completely and utterly wrong and ill-informed. A more competitive company tax rate will attract additional investment. It'll boost productivity. It'll increase the size of the economy permanently by more than 1% in the long term. It'll lead to more jobs. It'll lead to higher real wages over time. And of course, it'll lead to additional revenue for government over time, which will help underpin additional investments in schools, hospitals, roads and so on. Now, don't take my word for any of this. Look at what the then Treasury Secretary, Dr. Ken Henry, said when he was Treasury Secretary in the past Labor government, when he said that the biggest beneficiary of a lower company tax rate are workers. The biggest beneficiary of a lower company tax rate are workers, because it will help secure their job, it will help create more jobs so that people across Australia have a better opportunity to get ahead, and it will lead over time to increases in real wages on the back of additional investment, boosted productivity, and of course an increase in the size of the economy.
Specifically about those claims from the Australian Institute, they say that figures from the US IRS. That's what they're basing it on, $11 billion Australian over the next 10 years. What do you think the figure's going to be?
Well, they completely ignore how these things actually work in practice. And the way these things will work in practice is that a more competitive company tax rate in Australia will help us bring more investment into Australia, will help us grow the economy by more, will help us create more jobs, will help us increase real wages over time. Now, I suspect that the Greens-aligned Australia Institute is not the most reliable witness when it comes to the effect of economic policy. Remember that the Greens want to form a government with Labor, and Labor, if they have half a chance, will form a government with the Greens. That'll lead to higher taxes, fewer jobs, and weaker borders. That is not what Australia needs. Australia needs our plan for jobs and growth, and Australia needs the coalition's strong and unequivocal commitment to strong border protection.
That's the Finance Minister, Matthias Cormann, in Canberra. We'll leave him there.